Have you ever wondered why some conversations with women seem to hit a wall, even when you're trying your best? Today, we're diving into 3 common communication styles that might be secretly sabotaging your connections, and more importantly, I'll show you exactly what to do instead. Trust me, these insights will transform how you approach conversations. Before we dive into the specific styles, let's understand what's really at stake here. You know that feeling when a promising connection fizzles out for no apparent reason? Often, it's these subtle communication mistakes that create invisible barriers. These patterns don't just affect one conversation, they can prevent you from developing the kind of deep, meaningful relationships you're looking for. The most frustrating part? Many guys are pushing women away without even realizing it, simply because they're following communication patterns that seem logical to them. Let's talk about the first major communication style that can kill attraction faster than you might realize. I call this one the interrogator. You might recognize this pattern. It's when a guy treats every conversation like a job interview. It usually starts innocently enough. "What do you do for work?" Followed immediately by, "Where did you grow up?" And then, "What are your hobbies?" But there's no breathing room between questions, no natural flow. The conversation feels mechanical, like checking boxes on a form rather than having a genuine exchange. While the intention might be to show interest, it actually creates a one-sided dynamic where one person feels like they're being investigated rather than engaged with. This approach fails for several key psychological reasons. When someone feels like they're being interrogated, their brain actually triggers a mild stress response. They start feeling like they need to have the right answers rather than being themselves. It creates an uncomfortable power dynamic, one person asking all the questions, while the other person feels obligated to answer and defend their responses. Most importantly, it prevents the natural back and forth that builds genuine connection and chemistry. There's no room for spontaneity or shared discovery. Now, here's how to transform those interrogation-style conversations into engaging, flowing discussions that create real connection. Instead of just asking, "What do you do for work?" share something about your own experience first, then ask for their take. For example, "I recently switched careers because I wanted more creative freedom. What made you choose your field?" This creates a collaborative conversation rather than an interview. When something catches your attention in their response, follow that thread naturally. If they mention loving to travel, don't jump to an unrelated topic. Explore what draws them to different cultures, or share an interesting travel story of your own. Plant interesting details in your stories that they can ask about later. If you mention "That reminded me of this crazy situation in Barcelona," but don't immediately tell the full story, it creates natural curiosity and gives them a chance to drive the conversation too. For every 2 statements or stories you share, ask 1 question. This 2-to-1 ratio helps maintain balance and keeps the conversation flowing naturally without feeling like an interrogation. It's not about rigid rules, but about creating a rhythm that feels natural and engaging. The second communication style that often backfires is what I call the one-upper. And trust me, this one is particularly sneaky because it often comes from a good place. You might recognize these patterns in conversations, either in yourself or others. She shares a story about her challenging day at work, and you immediately jump in with your even more stressful experience. You think you're relating, but you're actually competing. When she's talking about something important to her, you find yourself mentally preparing your own story instead of truly listening, waiting for your chance to share something better. You might catch yourself saying things like, "That's nothing, wait until you hear what happened to me," or, "Well, if you think that's bad," phrases that subtly diminish her experiences. The real damage happens beneath the surface. Every time you one-up someone's experience, you're essentially telling them their feelings aren't valid or important enough. This creates an emotional wall that's hard to break down. Over time, this pattern builds a subtle form of resentment. People start sharing less because they know their experiences will be overshadowed. Most critically, this style prevents the vulnerability needed for real connection. If someone feels their experiences will be trumped, they'll never open up about the things that really matter. Instead of one-upping, let's transform these conversations into opportunities for genuine connection through active listening. The here method is your new best friend. Hold space without interrupting. Empathize with their emotions. Acknowledge their experience and respond thoughtfully. For example, when she's sharing something challenging, focus on being present rather than planning your response. Use phrases that show you understand and value their experience. That must have been really frustrating, or I can see why you'd feel that way. These validation statements show you're truly listening and care about their perspective. Instead of jumping to your own story, ask questions that help them explore their experience further. How did that make you feel? Or, what do you think you learned from that situation? This shows genuine interest and helps create deeper conversations. When you do share related experiences, frame them as ways to connect rather than compete. I had a similar experience that helped me understand what you're going through, rather than let me tell you about something even worse that happened to me. The key is to support and relate, not overshadow. The third communication style that often creates distance is the problem solver, and this one is particularly tricky because it comes from such a genuine desire to help. This is how the problem solver typically shows up in conversations. She starts sharing about a difficult situation at work, and before she can even finish expressing how she feels, you're already listing 3 different solutions. You think you're being helpful, but you're actually shutting down the emotional aspect of the conversation. When she's processing her feelings about a situation, you immediately jump to, well, why don't you just? Statements, trying to fix something that might not need fixing at all. You find yourself getting frustrated when she doesn't immediately implement your solutions, not realizing that sometimes sharing and being understood is more important than finding an immediate fix. Here's why this approach often leads to disconnection. When you jump straight to solutions, you're essentially saying your feelings aren't as important as fixing this problem. This can make her feel like her emotional experience isn't valid or understood. The more you push logical solutions, the more she might feel the need to defend why she's feeling the way she does, creating a cycle of frustration on both sides. This approach can make her feel like she's being treated as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood, which can be incredibly isolating. Let's transform problem-solving mode into something much more powerful, emotional connection. Before even thinking about solutions, start with empathy. Try something like, that sounds really challenging, or I can see why you'd feel overwhelmed by that. This creates an immediate emotional connection and shows you're prioritizing her feelings over quick fixes. The feel, felt, found approach is incredibly effective. I understand how you feel, acknowledging current emotions. I've felt that way too, creating connection. I've found that, sharing insights only when appropriate. This structure ensures emotional validation comes before any potential solutions. Create a space where she feels safe to express herself fully by using encouraging phrases like, tell me more about that, or how has that been affecting you? This shows you're interested in understanding the full picture, not just the surface level problem. Here's the game changer. Simply ask, would you like to hear some ideas about this, or do you just need someone to listen? This one question shows tremendous emotional intelligence and respect for what she actually needs in the moment, not what you think she needs. Let's put it all together and see how these different approaches stack up against each other. On one side, we have the patterns that kill connection, and on the other, the approaches that build lasting bonds. When you fire questions like a news reporter, you create pressure instead of comfort, creating a natural flow where conversation moves effortlessly back and forth. Trying to top every story makes others feel diminished and unheard. Showing you're truly present and understanding what's being shared. Jumping straight to solutions bypasses the crucial emotional connection. Acknowledging feelings first, making others feel truly seen and understood. Getting stuck in just the logical details misses the emotional depth women often seek. Contributing your own experiences while leaving space for others. Taking over the conversation creates an imbalance that prevents real connection. Creating an environment where deep, authentic sharing can happen naturally. Before we wrap up, let's cement these powerful insights that can transform your connections with women. The most attractive quality isn't having the perfect response, it's showing that you truly understand. When you focus on genuine understanding rather than crafting your next comment, You create space for real connection to develop. Remember that emotions aren't problems to be solved, they're experiences to be shared. When you create space for emotional expression, you build trust and intimacy naturally. Your experiences and stories matter, but timing is everything. Share them to build bridges of understanding, not to prove points or overshadow others. True connection isn't forced. It flows naturally when you remove these common barriers. Trust in the process of genuine interaction rather than trying to control it.